College here in the capital city of Tshwane. Let's look at day 73 of the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry, and entering the chat, so to speak, is controversial Northwest businessman Suleiman Carrim. We saw in the lead up to his anticipated testimony in the first time, his court bid to have the proceedings interdicted insofar as his testimony is concerned, losing that, coming to the commission and then having gotten this extension for today and tomorrow. And again, requesting for these proceedings to be heard insofar as his testimony is concerned in camera. That's the judgment we're waiting for this morning from Justice Mbuyiseli Madlanga to give the reasons around that bid to have his testimony delivered in secret. Although, again, as we would say, the cat is out of the bag. We know who's testifying. And Eldred de Klerk, good morning. I want to bring you into the conversation because the Commission is really interested to hear his perspective on several individuals who've also looped him into the allegations of corruption insofar as gratuities he would have received from the medical business that Vusi Musicat Matlala was running right here in the capital city. Gratuities up to around 2.4 million rand, but he's also expected to give testimony around some figures that have already made themselves known to the Commission, including Minister on Special Leave Senzo Mchunu and Brown Mogotsi.
Absolutely, and it's imperative that he comes and tells his story because these relationships with these individuals around the contract that you already cited, this is what the Commission needs to finally get clarity as to what role Vusi Musicat Matlala played and how his relationships with particular generals or police officers galvanized his ability or strengthened his ability to secure these contracts or even be in a position to bid for these contracts. So it's imperative that Carrim just comes and tells that story plainly and simply. Yes, what role did he play? He doesn't seem to be a major player in terms of having benefited directly from this, but apparently he did benefit from it. And if he did, to what extent, did he benefit, and how he facilitated the acquisition of, or at least the cancelled contract of, what was it, 360 million from SAPS?
So, yes, and let's go then to how dangerous all of this is in the broader scheme of things. We've already seen and we've heard from the provincial spokesperson about people who have been named to a series of events, for example, in the city of Ekurhuleni, having died, of course, we know quite prominently in December last year. One of the witnesses here was murdered outside his home. Another person who was mentioned in the narration of the Commission of a crime committing suicide at a filling station in Boksburg. This is what Suleiman Carrim is leaning into, saying that he himself has experienced death threats. He's concerned about his testimony. His family's lives are at risk. And I want to read a sentence out of his application, which says, "It would be concerning in the extreme if the Commission is willing to gamble with my life or my family's life to see whether the Commission's kill rate would secure a hat trick, becoming the third then in the two deaths that I've already mentioned." The Commission took a rather dim view of what he'd said, almost the implication that it was the Commission's work that was responsible for their deaths. And by the way, Carrim, we understand, had been offered police protection, which he has now which he had refused. What do you make of his concerns around his own safety, and how does that speak to the potential of what he could tell the Commission that warrants those types of threats?
Well, first and foremost, Iman, and I think we covered this in an earlier broadcast, is the fact that we're assuming that his death threat has got anything to do with what he knows that is in front of the Commission, and it may have nothing to do with what's in front of the Commission, but let's assume it does. Then it's imperative that he speaks directly to the evidence leader and the Commission and actually clarifies where he thinks this threat is coming from, what the nature of the threat is, and who in fact has been threatened. He speaks about himself, his family, and his businesses, and says that all of those are being threatened. And he doesn't provide, at least not in the public forum that he created, the sufficient detail for the commission to assess the credibility of the threat, the nature of the threat, and then how to actually mitigate the threat. So if he's asking the commission simply to say, let me do this in camera, the commission has to weigh up, and apparently they've had, I think, 8 in-camera applications, and they've only granted a few. So if the commission says, and the commission today will, if they say to him, fine, we grant you your in-camera application. Remember, he's saying that he's willing to testify. It's just that he doesn't want to do it in person. Let's say they actually grant that. He'll have no recourse but then to start his testimony. If he then persists in saying, no, I'm not ready to do all that, then we know that there may be more to what he's saying, and he may actually then prove to be a reluctant, or hostile witness. If the commission says to him, no, you got to come in person, he then says, well, I'll take this for some sort of judicial review process. And the commission have given themselves sufficient time to formulate a response. And today they'll come in some detail to speak to why they make a decision one way or another. In relation to the threat against him, remember his legal counsel said, well, there's only 48 hours. You don't have enough time to do a threat assessment. Well, the threat assessment can be done relatively quickly, as we've already discussed. And it involves, of course, looking at evaluating the potential threat around him. It looks at where the vulnerabilities in his own security measures are at the moment around his person, his property, his movement. And then the commission has one other big thing to do. They have to consider what the consequences might be of them make a decision one way or another. Each of those carry consequences for the commission. And the commission's overwhelming consideration is one, yes, the safety of witnesses. They're also concerned about fair and just process, or effective justice. And they're also concerned about transparency. So those are some of the principal considerations the commission will take into account in making their decision today. And then at the end of it, they have to look at this and say, okay, how do we put it all together in terms of saying, what is then the risk of making a decision one way or another? And then what is it? We quantify that risk and decide on the weight of the what is probable, what decision do we make? And hopefully we hear from the commission that they've taken the 48 hours to make those considerations. Their team has worked at it, and today they'll come and provide us as South Africans their perspective on the quantified risk, the risk, the consequences of the decision, and actually tell us what informed the decision, Iman.
Ultimately, this is all about the evidence and the story that these various witnesses are sharing with the commission, backed by that concrete evidence. Given, as you have already outlined and we have extensively reported, Carrim's various bids either to avoid the commission entirely or to set the terms around which he would engage with the commission, how much can we honestly and realistically expect out of him in terms of his testimony?
Well, if he comes and he tries to obfuscate and duck and dive direct questions, then he is actually showing that he's a reluctant or at least hostile witness. That means the commission will just spend more time with him. The commission, as we've already said, is very good at making sure that somebody's comfortable, relaxed, that they don't feel under any undue stress and duress, and that they themselves present themselves as a credibility. They're the only ones who will undermine their own credibility by not being direct to the commission or with the commission and speaking their truth. If he says he doesn't know, then he must simply say he doesn't know. Trying to duck and dive is not going to do his credibility any good. One of the biggest questions I think we hopefully hear from him, and we may not get it from his testimony, but from a number of testimonies, is why did they go after the kind of police officers that they did, these generals and these other senior police officers? What made them susceptible to being cultivated? Is it a systemic issue? Was it their own personality? Was it their own thirst or lust for a particular lifestyle? We've already heard from one that they're money greedy. The other one was into cars. The other one had a sort of other lavish lifestyle and trouble and hotels and all kinds of things. So, yet, Iman, but that's both a reflection of the South African society and our own, materialistic ambitions. But it also shows you that there's something about who these criminal enterprises go after. Who do they go after? How do they spot these individuals? How do they cultivate them? And how do they understand that these individuals are vulnerable to being complicit or compromised and ultimately corrupted? That is sort of the sidebar story to all of this. And it would be fascinating at the end of this to kind of look at the broad spectrum of individuals and to understand that additional question to the one we hope he can come and tell us exactly what the relationship was and what these individuals, what the role they played in this contract process from what he knows as a businessman, and then ultimately how did he benefit from this. And remember, he doesn't have to implicate himself. He doesn't, he can simply say, yes, I benefited. If he says he doesn't, he has to prove otherwise. So unfortunately, he can be the nail in the coffin. And he can also tell us a lot more with shrewd questioning from the commission. And the commission has proved that they're able to do so, Imam.
Well, 2 hours from now is when we'll get that final decision, Eldred. And if we've seen the no-nonsense approach by the Commission already with regard to sick notes and absenteeism, it doesn't sound as if they're going to be incredibly generous in that ruling, given, as we've already heard from evidence leader Hasim, that protection has been provided to him, which he has refused. His reticence in wanting to testify, but finally making it here, making a series of suggestions in his submission that he was being targeted, although, as Commissioner Khumalo pointed out, no evidence had been provided to support that claim. It would seem that as long as the Commission believes that it's crossed all its T's and dotted its I's, done everything in its power to ensure that there was safety provided, but the pursuit of answers continues, that Carrim may ultimately be required, especially now that his identity is well known to the public through the highly publicized court bid and his first appearance here at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry, that it's likely we could hazard a fairly educated guess on which way the Commission would go today. But we wait for those proceedings to kick off at 9:30.